Some people think that the best Christian film to date will be released this weekend, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to the red carpet premiere to see it early, so that way I could give you my review on it. However, this does not mean that I'm gonna go easy on it, because I made sure to let them know that I would only do a review if I could be brutally honest, and they agreed. And given that this was the first ever crowdfunded movie to have a national release in theaters, expectations for this one were really high. So, what's my honest assessment of the film, and do I think that the movie lived up to its hype? And lastly, do I think that you should go see it? Well, let's go ahead and talk about it. Now, before we get started, just so you know, I won't be giving away anything that you can't find in the trailer or the Bible, so you don't have to worry about any spoilers here. Now, if you don't know what the film is about, it's about the life of Abraham in the Bible and centers on one of the most controversial and heart-wrenching episodes in all of Scripture. And that's when God commanded Abraham to sacrifice his only son Isaac on the mountain of Moriah. The movie follows the 3-day journey of Abraham, his son Isaac, and his 2 servants on their way to the mountain, while he encounters dangers and trials and wrestles with the unimaginable command to sacrifice his son. So let's start with what I liked and disliked about the movie production. So before the film started, I was fortunate enough to spend some time with the writer and the producer of the film, and I was shocked to learn that they filmed the entire movie with a budget of less than $250,000, which is insanely low. To give some perspective, one episode of The Chosen was done with I think around a $1.2 million budget, and season 3 had about a $20 million budget. So when I heard that, my expectations lowered a little bit. To think that you can get theater film quality for under $250,000 is insane. But when I started watching it and knowing that it was shot on such a small budget, one of the first things that I noticed was the surprising quality of the visuals. There's something about seeing these scenes, and especially the supernatural scenes, seeing them depicted in a realistic way that really recaptures the stories that we've all read and heard about so many times. The visuals really did help to immerse me in that ancient world, which is really quite the feat, because there haven't really been many major motion pictures that really brought the Old Testament to life on the big screen, besides maybe the 10 Commandments that came out almost 70 years ago, back when visuals were looking like this.
That you may know the power of the Lord.
Now, I'm not trying to hate on what some people consider to be a classic, but let's just say that we've come a long way.
Lord,
take now your son and go to the land of Moriah.
But beyond the visuals and with respect to the story, I really liked how they stayed pretty faithful to Abraham and Sarah's biblical narrative. Now, they did add one small subplot, but I don't think that it necessarily impacted the movie negatively, and that part still had a historical influence. But one of my absolute favorite things about the film was that they didn't shy away from the not so ideal parts of some of the characters' lives, like how they depicted Abraham and Sarah and Hagar. When you see it, you'll know what I mean, but that seemed pretty realistic. I was worried that these biblical figures might be portrayed as unrelatable people that are polished and always resilient, but instead, I was happy to see that we got to witness their imperfections and relatable struggles, a theme that was emphasized all throughout the entire movie. And along those lines, when it comes to authentic portrayals, I thought that Sarah Saeed, the actress that played Abraham's wife, I thought that she gave an exceptional performance in this movie. In my opinion, she did an amazing job bringing Sarah's character to life in a way that was authentic and sympathetic and believable. All of this helped me to feel the emotional weight that she felt as she navigated through some incredibly difficult times. And there were also 2 scenes in particular where Nicola Moed, the actor who played Abraham, where he got me feeling a little bit emotional. Now, I'm not going to say that I was tearing up or nothing like that, but those fans and my allergies and, yeah. But before we get to the content review and before you get too excited about the production, I should probably mention real quick what I didn't like about the production. Now, don't get me wrong, overall, I still thought it was really good, but there's still just a couple of things worth noting. Now, given the incredibly low budget of the film, you're not going to get an Avatar's type production. So some of the shots didn't feel as cinematic as I initially expected for them to, but that makes sense after you understand the limited resources that they had to work with. But honestly, overall, it still felt like a motion picture, and it didn't feel cheaply made to me. It just wasn't at the level of production as something like The Chosen. But my main gripe about the movie was the structure of the film, and this might just be a preference thing. But while the movie focuses on Abraham's 3-day journey to the mountain, we're met with numerous flashbacks from throughout him and Sarah's life as he continues his trek. And while I get that the purpose of the flashbacks was to appreciate the full scope of Abraham's sacrifice, in my personal opinion, they made the plot line a little too tough to follow, and it prevented the movie from being as climactic as it could have been. To me, it seemed like, because there was so much back and forth in time throughout the first act, the story started to feel like a series of disconnected events that weren't really being drawn together by an overarching narrative. Since it was a little bit hard for me to distinguish what time period we were in during the first half of the movie, the inconsistent tempo caused the first half of the movie to feel like it dragged on at times for me. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people who like that flashback structure in films and books. I'm just not one of those people, so it may not even be an issue for you. I just thought I would mention it for those of you that are like me and may not be crazy about that sort of structure. Alright, now with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the main plot from a Christian perspective. So now, of course, to no surprise, this film was met with several biblical references throughout, which, by the way, I really like how they explored those. One of the film's most pervasive themes centered on trusting God in the midst of uncertainty and the difficulties that accompany those times. Now here I'll say that one benefit of having flashbacks in the film was that it really drove home just the amount of time that passed between the promises that God made to Abraham and Sarah and their fulfillment, which brought to light just how deep their emotional journey would have been. When we read the stories in the Bible, sometimes we can lose sight of just how much time took place between events. Often decades might pass in the span of a few verses when we read the stories, and so the elapsed time is something that's easy to overlook or to forget about. But beyond that, an even deeper and more personal question that the movie explores is whether or not your faith can still stand when you're asked to give everything that's precious to you. You have to realize that Isaac was the miracle child that Abraham trusted God for, and he waited decades for the fulfillment of God's promise, which is why sacrificing him would have been much harder, especially when he hadn't done anything wrong. Yet, like the author of Hebrews says, by faith, Abraham, when God tested him, offered Isaac as a sacrifice. He who had embraced the promises was about to sacrifice his one and only son, even though God had said to him, it is through Isaac that your offspring will be reckoned. Abraham reasoned that God could even raise the dead, and so in a manner of speaking, he did receive Isaac back from death. This means that even though Abraham didn't know what God's plan was during this time, he still trusted in God to be faithful and do what he said he would do, and ultimately, God accomplished something far greater than Abraham would have known. As I watched this film, it really made me ask myself if there's things that God could ask me to sacrifice that I might struggle to give up out of fear of what could happen. But in seeing Abraham's willingness to give his only beloved son for the sake of God's goodness, it really motivated me to contemplate areas in my life where I could trust God more. And especially with Easter Sunday coming up, it reminded me of the ultimate one that gave his only son for my sake, even though he did no wrong. So getting back to the question that we asked at the beginning, is this the best Christian movie to come out so far? Well, my honest answer to that question, in my opinion, it isn't. But that isn't to say that it's still not a really good movie and one that I wouldn't recommend. Despite what I would consider to be some pacing issues in the first half of the movie, it still delivers a visually captivating and powerful story about the importance of faith, obedience, and sacrifice that will challenge anyone to look inward and consider what it looks like for them to walk by faith. So because of that, I would recommend for Christians to go see the movie and to use it as an opportunity to discuss with your family what faith can look like in your lives. Now, personally, I'm encouraged to see higher quality Christian films coming out. And if you're curious how those people were on a personal level, I can honestly say that I genuinely like David Heller, the Baptist Christian who was the writer and the producer of the film, and Nicola, the actor who played Abraham, and Sarah, the actress who played Sarah, as well as the other people involved in the film that I met. Oh, and I told the lead horseman that I would say something about how he stole the show or something like that. Nah, but really, they were all honestly really great and intelligent people, and a lot of them were longtime viewers of the channel as well, so that was also cool. Everyone at Angel Studios was incredibly kind to me, and I also want to thank them for sponsoring this video and allowing me to give my honest thoughts on the movie. Of course, this doesn't mean that I endorse all of the content distributed by Angel Studios due to a conflict of theologies, but some of the content like this movie and the Chosen series, I think were done incredibly well, and I would definitely recommend. And by the way, if you haven't seen The Chosen or you want to catch up on it during Easter, you can watch it on the Angel app for free. But anyways, these are just some of my thoughts on the film, and I would love to know, are you planning to go see it? And if you do go see it, make sure you come back after and leave a comment down below letting me know what you think about the movie. And the next time that you find yourself afraid to trust God in incredibly tough times, you can just ask yourself, what do you mean?